Well, hello everyone, and welcome to our webinar as part of the Results at the Community Level Learning Community Group. This is one of our open learning communities, and today we're going to focus on strategizing and measuring community level change. So we always like to begin our webinars with the promise of community action, since it really grounds us in the work that we do. So you can join me as you say this at your desk. Community action changes people's lives in the spirit of hope, improves communities, and makes America a better place to live. We care about the entire community, and we are dedicated to helping people help themselves and each other. So before we get started, just a couple technical notes as you are hopefully all connected with your audio. You are on mute. Everyone was put on mute upon entry to the webinar. And we'll continue that way. And so the way we're going to ask questions today is through the chat box. So up at the top, there's some icons at the left-hand side. And you can choose the chat bubble one to enter any questions or comments you have throughout the webinar. We do encourage questions and comments as we go along. There'll be some times when we do pause to kind of get your thoughts on some things as we talk about community level work. And then we actually do have a couple of polls throughout this webinar as well. So we will prompt you when those are launched, and then all of you who are fully connected with the computer will be able to choose your response, and we'll get the poll of the group. And if you are having any sort of technical difficulties, the way that you can try to troubleshoot on your own is through the Communicate tab of the webinar box. So if you go up towards the upper right-hand side, you'll see a menu tab that says Communicate. And then if you drop down that box and go to Audio Connection, you can choose whether you're connected via computer or phone audio. If your computer audio is not working very well, you're not hearing very well, sometimes switching to phone will help, and you'll be a little bit louder that way. And then as far as the speaker and microphone audio test, you can test your computer speakers and adjust the volume that way as well. And if you have any continued trouble with audio, you can chat me through the chat box and let me know, and I can try to help you troubleshoot. All right, so our agenda today, we're going to present a little bit of our learning community information, just to let everybody know kind of the framework behind this webinar. Then we're going to go through some introductions, introduce our subject matter experts for today. And then we'll be talking, of course, about strategizing and measuring community level change. We'll have a question and answer session. So as we go and as you have questions, please type those in the chat box. And then we'll go through our meeting schedule and wrap up for the day. Generally, these are about 90-minute webinars. And so that'll be the maximum time allotted for today. So really the purpose behind our learning community at the Community Action Partnership is to analyze community action outcomes and identify effective, promising, and innovative practice models that alleviate the causes and conditions of poverty. So we're all about building the Community Action Network capacity to really fight poverty throughout the nation. So our work also is very much centered in our National Community Action Network theory of change. We have our 3 community action goals, 2 of them very much focused on community level work, goal 2 and 3, which is really kind of looking at what this learning community group is focused on. Of course, we have our services and strategies, which are the various ways we work to carry out different community level as well as individual and family level work. And then, of course, our core principles and performance management framework for community action is very foundational to our work as well. So with our learning communities, we have various opportunities to engage. Today we're in our Results at the Community Level Open Learning Community Group. We also have a few other open learning community groups, as you see on your screen. Then we have intensive learning community groups as well as a community of practice. And so the intensive and community of practice opportunities are by application only. That period is closed. But the open LPGs are open for enrollment pretty much at any time. And I'm going to go to a graphic real quick. Hopefully I select the right one. I did. So what I want to emphasize is with our open learning community groups, there's various ways to engage. And so you can kind of engage and learn through these open groups by opting into any one of these three different opportunities. So we have our national webinar series, which is our Webinar Wednesday events that happen at 2 p.m. Eastern Time on every Wednesday. We don't have a result at the community level topic every Wednesday, but at least every month or 6 weeks we have that. And so those are really focused around knowledge building. Then we also have our our affinity group calls, which are really focused around engagement with other peers throughout the network, as well as a subject matter expert for a deeper level of discussion. Then the other piece of it is our Community Action Academy, which is also known as Moodle, and it's an online learning management system where we offer different courses, resources, as well as discussion forums for more on-demand learning and engagement. And so you can kind of opt in depending on your availability and interest with the topic. Of course, we hope that you engage through all three, but that, of course, would be the richest learning experience you can get is by opting into all three, and we still try to make it very manageable for your schedule. So we'll be sharing more information about this throughout the webinar, about our upcoming affinity group call, about our Community Action Academy and the resources that are on there, and any upcoming national webinar series as well. All right, so next, also just want to point out that we really work to integrate a lot of different components and concepts into the learning community work. So you can see here a lot of those pieces that we really try to bring in to the work that we're doing as far as community level work, looking at racial equity, data analysis, data collection, of course integrating Roma concepts related to the annual report, so that it can really be both very informative as well as helpful to the work that you're doing in your agencies. So this is just a definition that we kind of work under. It's actually from the Harvard Center of the Developing Child about what a learning community is and how they really provide a space and structure for people to align around shared goals, connecting people, organizations, and systems, and holding members accountable to common agenda, metrics, and outcomes like we work to do in community action. So these communities, we really want to enable participants to share results, learn from each other, and improve the ability to achieve rapid yet significant progress in different areas. So we're all about small actions, lots of people, and big change. Just a picture of what our learning community represents. We have all 11 regions that are represented throughout our learning communities. 33 states throughout the nation are engaged. That is totaling 407 counties. And so our kind of ultimate reach through hopefully what we're intending to do with the community action agencies, state associations, is really being able to help communities and individuals. And you see that number of individuals served through those different agencies and counties that are represented. So our Learning Community Resource Center team is really kind of the behind the scenes, coordinators and thought processors and all of that behind a lot of this work with the learning community. We have our project director, Tiffany Marley, of course our director of training technical assistant, Straw Crocker. Hyacinth McKinley is one of our main program associates. We also have Liza Portis and Cherry Frankowski. And we have Jeannie Chapin as a consultant for our Whole Family Approaches learning community work and economic mobility initiative. And then I myself, I'm Courtney Kohler. I'm a senior associate on the training and technical assistance team. Also with us today, we have our subject matter expert for this learning community group, Dr. Barbara Mooney. Many of you are probably aware of who she is, but if not, she is the director for the Association of Nationally Certified Roma Trainers. So she's going to be with us today talking about strategizing and measuring community change. So Barbara, I'll go ahead and hand it over to you.
Thanks, Courtney. I hope that we don't have an echo, but let me know if there's a problem.
I can hear you good.
Good, thank you. So when we started this series, we looked at the topics that we would cover, and for this session, we were talking about strategizing and measuring community change. And those two things really need to go together. A lot of times we want to skip to what are we going to measure and how are we going to measure it, or we can't measure it, or it's difficult to measure. But we need to really contextualize our measurement thinking in the strategies that we're going to be creating. And so what we want to do is we want to think about these techniques that are common for community level work. Two of them that are specifically called out, theory of aligned contributions and mutually reinforcing activities, as a way to think about the strategies and the measurement techniques that we'll look at today. So the first thing that we want to really talk about is how this process of community level work really requires a shift in thinking. It requires agencies to start to think about things in a different way, having a community-centric strategic planning process. We've talked a lot about the need in prior webinars. What's the need? How do you identify the need? Are you clear about what the community level need is? Is it something that you can clearly describe? Do you know the elements or the factors that are contributing to that need? So we spend a lot of time thinking about that. I mean, I don't think we can spend too much time on it because I think it's an important piece and that we keep coming back to. What was the need that we wanted to identify? Do we need to address the need in a different way? And as part of the needs assessment and beginning to plan process, there's the idea of prioritizing the issues that the agency is going to work on. What is it that the agency is going to work on? And how do we know that it really is a community level need? So I thought I would just kind of as a refresher, as think what is a community level need, or what goes into a community level need. We could go back to this concept I know you've heard of, this wicked problems, this idea of wicked problems. That was a term that was created back in 2008 by Edward Weber from Washington State University. He created a paper and he talked about the fact that there were wicked problems, and he really identified the problems in terms of the knowledge base or the issues that were related to the problem. So these unstructured problems that it's really difficult to precisely define the cause and effect. You might be able to say, oh well, because people don't have a high school education, they are unable to get good paying jobs. You know, that seems to be a cause and effect. But then as you dig deeper, you say, well, why do they not have a good education? And so that you can see that there's this ripple effect in the thinking about this. And so it requires high information demands. It requires you to really know a lot about the subject. And what happens is that we need to draw on the information, the input from a lot of different sectors, and then we need to understand that the problem-solving process can change, can morph. As you're starting to work on success, you're realizing that, oh, wait, you didn't think about something. There was another piece of it. And so it's difficult to get consensus from all the people who have something to do with your problem. You know, there's a lot of different things going on. And so, for example, if you're talking about a lot of the widely acclaimed community level projects are about school success, either at the early ages or at high school graduation, and there's lots of different approaches to addressing that. And so we need to be able to think of what is it that we're going to be looking at in our problem solving, and this is one of the problems is this unstructured nature. The other two are that the problems are cross-cutting, and that is that they it's not going to take a single solution. It takes the diversity that we've talked about before, and that the problems are relentless. That we're not going to be able to just say, okay, we're going to solve this problem and that's going to be the end of it, but that we need to know that as we solve the problem, we'll need to be adjusting our strategies and looking at new ways to address whatever is coming up next as we solve one part of the problem. So this really requires this community-centric planning approach. It requires you to start to think about things in a little different way. Of course, you're going to start with your own agency plan, but you really need to be thinking into a larger process because remember that knowledge base, we need diversity in our thinking, so we need to be able to have other input. So I created this little chart to think about things that are agency-specific, planning where you're going to identify the need. First of all, you're going to do that at your own agency level because you're using your community assessment. Now, you may change the need, but before you even start to engage anyone or think about anything else, you have to clearly identify the need. And then what's your agency want to do? What part of it do they think they can help? They're going to brainstorm what could the change look like? What might we measure? And then think about, well, what kind of resources do we have that we could devote to the initiative? So those things are all done before you really go out into the larger community. But then you need to know that whatever you've thought about so far, you might have to change it when you start to get input from your partners, where you start to get a shared understanding of the problem. It goes beyond what your agency has done. And then you're going to identify some common outcomes, establish some strategies and aligned activities that will produce a community approach, and then agree on some measures of how things might be done. So I think do we have a poll here?
Yeah, so at this time we do have a poll that we'd like for you all to participate in. In looking at this slide with the different planning roles. So I'm going to open that up. It'll be launched for, let's see, we have about 5 minutes allotted. We won't take that much time. So if you could answer the question, which type of planning should you use? Agency-specific planning, larger community planning, or both? Give you all another minute or so to answer that.
And I know when we do these polls, it takes you a minute to say, oh, I'm supposed to be clicking on something. What is it I'm supposed to be doing? So that's why they usually give a little time, but we don't need 5 minutes, certainly.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you, Courtney.
We've had about half of the people online respond, so we'll give another little bit for the rest of you to give an answer. Don't worry, your individual answer will not be shown. Just want to get a sense of what people think.
I think this is a new concept for some agencies, and for other agencies, it's just the way they do business. So we're just trying to get a sense of how you feel the planning process might work.
All right, we'll give you another 10 seconds, then we'll close the poll. All right. going to share with you the polling results as this loads.
Okay, so the majority of people really felt that both were important, and a few people thought that agency-specific planning was key, and some thought that the larger community planning was key, but the majority thought that both were important. And I think as we go forward and we talk about the identification of strategies and measures, we should be thinking about this balance, how these two kinds of planning might be incorporated. Thanks for that poll, Courtney.
Sure.
We're going to think a little bit about considering strategies. So I found this article, and it's talking about identifying existing strategies. So if we think about an issue that faces our community, and one that I mentioned earlier was school success. So we're seeing an increase in high school dropout rates. We're losing more of our high school students in some communities. And is anybody doing anything about that now? I mean, we identify that as a need, but then we want to think about, is there a concentration of existing strategies out there? Is there duplication? Is it that several people or several agencies are doing the same thing, but there's other things that you can think of that no one is doing? So there's this concept called map the moving trains. And I thought this was kind of a neat visual just to think about the moving trains as really being service providers, human service providers, and thinking about the fact that we need to know what's really happening out there already. We'd have to assume that there are people out there that would want to be partners in this initiative that you're going to be spearheading, and that they may already be moving, they already be on the moving trains, but then there might be other people that haven't been involved yet. So we might want to work together to just kind of try to figure out what's the best thing to do. There's an article about these moving trains and this concept of mapping the strategies that'll be posted in the Academy. And just one quote that I got from that work was about the idea that that if there are underutilized community assets, we often are saying we can't be successful because there's not enough funds to help us with doing this project. But the hypothesis in this paper is that there are underutilized assets that could be engaged and brought together into a larger strategy so that that each of them can see a role in contributing to overall success, and that that each can become contributors, and that they believe that these unidentified and underutilized community assets really can work together to really address the need. So we assume that people would want to work together if they had a chance. This was just one example of a partnership in Atlanta that was cited, and this is at the very beginning of the partnership. They came together to convened by the United Way to address the issue, and you can see that the different resources were all just sort of scattered around. They're coming together, they're talking. But look at what happened after 2 years of their approach. They've clustered the partners together in focus areas. So you see the pre-K through young adulthood being one being a neighborhood focus, one being policy makers. so that this is just a different way of looking at the structure. And this is about one kind of outcome, and it's a process outcome. It's about how the partnership works together. And that is really one of the things that gets evaluated in the research about community work. Of course, we're talking about the result that would change, the community change that would happen, that it's what the initiative has been able to accomplish. But there are also evaluations about the structure and functioning of the initiative itself. And it includes, well, so here's the specific, the primary outcomes might be a decrease or an increase in some measurable condition, changes to policies, which will ultimately relate in some changes to conditions. But it can also be about things, some process outcomes. So things like service integration. Can we demonstrate that because of our community initiative, that services in our community are more integrated? Can we identify additional benefits that are available because of our initiative? Can we point to greater engagement of a specific target population? So maybe a population that we know has been in need, but we have been unable to reach. And through the efforts of our initiative, we've created greater engagement of and services to those people. And could there be financial impacts that are cited that could be based on the more efficient use of resources? Just a little commercial message here. There's a document on the partnership's website called Collaboration Checkup, and in it there are a couple of ideas. There's two sets of matrix. This is the second one, and it's really about those kinds of things we just talked about: perceived service integration, additional benefits, financial benefits. It's a little scale of how an initiative might move forward to achieve these process outcomes of the partnership. And then some other things about partnership functioning itself, or about the initiative functioning, that are about the leadership of the initiative itself, how the backbone organization, or how the key organizer is governing the initiative. Is there satisfaction, diversity, and sustainability of the initiative itself? And I think we want to ask a question about that. But you also had a question, I think.
Yeah. So we did have a poll to do, but we also had someone come through and say that they didn't. To maybe revisit that last slide about how they're working in Georgia and explain a little bit more about that.
It was just an example, and it's a graphic that you can. I can't make it go back any further. I'm having trouble here. Wait, hold on. It's a. I can't. Courtney, can you make it go back?
This one?
One more.
Okay.
Are you seeing the graph of the Atlanta? There, that one.
There we go. Yes.
So it's just this is a graphic. You can look at it in more detail, but what they're showing is that the result of meeting together after 2 years, working on the initiative, developed this concept of clusters around specific topic areas. So the big picture issue of how the improvement in school success was going to happen was divided into different topic areas that are all part of a big picture, so that rather than thinking of just individual services being provided, pre-K through young adulthood, which is in the lower left of this slide. They thought about that as a cluster and about the partners who were able to contribute to it. So it's just a way to show how they could be structured in different ways, how initiatives can be structured in different ways to create strategies that affect the whole community. And there's much more about this in the document itself if you want to look at it on online or in the piece. But,
yeah, the link that I sent a little while ago in the chat is to that Community Action Academy site that Barbara referenced that has a lot of these additional resources if you'd like to learn more about, some of these examples.
So we were going to ask you what you think about this idea of evaluating the initiative itself. We want to think about, of course, evaluating the overall outcome and how we're going to measure that. But what do you think about evaluating how the initiative is coming together? Have you developed leadership? Have you been able to establish governance? Are the partners satisfied with the interactions? Do you have diversity of members? Maybe there's some other things I wanted to talk about first before we were going to poll. But
no, I think that was it.
Okay.
If you want to go back to that slide with the other things to measure, I think what we wanted to ask was about what is your opinion on measuring the functioning of the community group. So kind of looking at these on your screen and the different key elements of functioning, what is your opinion on measuring that? Should you do it, not do it, or are you just not really sure?
we'll see a little bit more discussion about this in a couple of minutes, but just the concept of it being a different kind of success, to be able to, we're looking at community work and increasing our community work, but you can't do it alone. And so, just setting up the whole initiative, it takes time to do it, it takes effort and resources, and how valuable is it to know anything about any of those things?
Okay, we've had over half the day complete, so we'll give you just another 20 seconds or so to finish your poll answer. All right, we're going to go ahead and close the poll and see what the results are.
Oh, no, that's very interesting. So the majority of people said do it, and nobody said don't do it, although we did have a comment in the chat that said that it will take time and effort to do this kind of measurement, and how important is it? How valuable, what are people going to talk about it? And if there's is there a way to do it that it isn't going to take resources from the primary mission? So That's an important piece. And I liked it that people said they weren't sure because, geez, I don't know how I feel about this, and I've been thinking about it for a couple of years. So there's another piece coming up that might add a little more to it. We don't have another poll on it, but that we'll think about some more. So thanks for participating in the poll. I'm going to do a quick definition of these two terms, aligned contribution and mutually reinforcing activities. There are two different terms that, in my mind, mean pretty much the same thing, and they just mean kind of pulling together, I think. But they mean that the initiative members have to make collective decisions and that they act together in service to a common result. That the actions complement, support, leverages, or correlates all of the others so that you don't have a rogue group going off doing something independent. They focus on collective program and system change rather than individual programs or organizations. So it's not just about a bunch of organizations coming together and saying, here are the services that I do, and I'm willing to continue to do these services for this population, and not really thinking about, well, how might the system change? How might we be able to collectively do something better? So this is this change in context, and to really start to learn from the data that you're seeing. Is there a way to improve individual services so that they're more in line? And are the actions of the members aligned so that they can actually produce a result? Is there sufficient scope and scale? Is there enough, if there, were unlimited resources, as one of the members said, you could do almost anything, but what can we do to assure that there's a scope and scale of the actions? This isn't a very good graphic. I'm not very, I'm a little graphically challenged, but what I tried to say here is that there's a group of, there could be individual services and strategies along this top row that have to do with different domains of well-being, of family well-being, and of house and of community well-being, and that if you identify all those strategies, it's like those moving trains. You identify the strategies that are in the community, and then think about how they could be brought together, how they could come together to actually achieve more family level outcomes as measured by the National Performance Indicators for individuals and families, but they could also come together to make changes and see outcomes at the community level. So this is a chart, and it's not totally transparent, but this is the Casey Foundation theory, and ultimately we want to address this, where the orange arrow is pointing, the measurable population level improvement on a condition of well-being for children, families, and communities. Yes, that's the outcome that we want to get to. But sometimes that's going to take 5 years, 10 years, 15 years. It's going to take a long time. I just saw it last night on TV, a commercial about the Chesapeake Bay and how they're still working on trying to save the water there. That there's been they've been working for 15 years on improving the conditions that have been damaged by the over-fertilization of farms in the Pennsylvania communities that the water feeds into the Chesapeake Bay. So that's a long-term community project, and it's been successful, but it's not done. Remember that it's not once and done. It's a relentless problem, and they have to keep working on it. So that measurable population level improvement may not be something that you can measure this year or next year. So what are you going to focus on measuring? And And this is more of the discussion about the aligned contributions, where there's a critical mass of leaders coming together to focus on a single measurable result. Those are the blue and purple arrows there. And one of the studies was about measuring both alignment and action. So it really speaks to this functioning of the initiative. And if you're a year into your initiative and you haven't seen measurable progress on the actual outcome, what else can you talk about? And this is one of the things that was researched. It was a piece of research done for Casey, and it's in the documents that we posted. But there was a chart where it talks about alignment and action, and it's that members have to be both aligned and act. And of course, the gold standard, or the ultimate goal, is that all of the members' actions contribute to the result. So it's that upper right quadrant. Actions contribute to results, and all of the actions work towards mutual goals. They're aligned. The members are active and they're aligned. And of course, the least favorable is that there's not much action, and the actions really don't, what small amount of actions there are, don't really contribute to the results. So the study itself actually did, and these are the graphs for from the study that talks about the actions of the group on the left side and the alignment of the group on the right side. And you'll see that there was an increase in action and alignment over the meeting time, over the first 6 meetings, and I can't remember what the time frame was for the meetings, but and then there was a reduction in both action and alignment, and they talk about why it seems like things were reduced, and part of it is a factor of their measurement tools. So they weren't measuring things very well, and they weren't able to really talk about, once they were really aligned and programs were working together, it decreased some of the alignment measurement tools. So this is the result, and there was a lessons learned section, and it talked about successful network performance, accountability, and how network performance is possible when there's attention paid to development of capacity and to individual skill building, and that if the network holds itself accountable for performance, then that performance system is more likely to be committed to aligned activities. So this was a study that was done, and they found out how well the agencies were aligned and active. I think you need to consider in your first years or your early years of a project that you are not going to be measuring a lot of movement on the big community level outcomes. And you might be thinking, what else are you going to measure? What else are you going to be able to talk about? So here was another project, cultural data project. The two things that they said was that they agreed to agree on the data to be collected, that while that process was contentious, they did create a standard set of defined indicators. That was the first outcome of this project, that they were able to create a standard set of defined indicators that everybody agreed on. That was it. That was the outcome. That was the measurement. In Cincinnati, the STRIVE program, this is really well researched, and there's some information about this project specifically because it's so huge. It has 300 participants, and they're focused on specific education goals. And here's what they came up with. They identified these progress indicators, and they really are more what we would think of as the final results, that children are assessed to be ready for school. That's that there's an increase in the percent of children, not just counting the number of individual children that were assessed, but to look at the community as a whole, the school district or the community, to say that you've increased the percent of children that are ready for school. And you'll see that each of these is about what the percent change of the rate of change, the population rate, except for indicator 5 below, which is an average score. Still, again, it's not it's not talking about the individuals getting scores, but really that there's an average score that's increased, and that there's a number of college degrees that were conferred that's also increased. So this was also about identifying these progress indicators and identifying how they were going to collect the measurements for those indicators. A lot of these projects are about creating a shared measurement system, and that's essential, really, that when you're strategizing, when you're creating your community strategies, that you're saying, and this is how we're going to measure it. And that there really has to be agreement on what it is that we're trying to get at. What's that overarching outcome? What's the real change that we expect to see? And that we really look at collecting data and measuring results, and that this information is collected regularly and is shared. It's very important that the data from the measurement systems get shared, because we need to know what's happening. We absolutely need to know. So we in community action have a little leg up. We have this standardized set of indicators already. If we could get our initiatives to buy into any of the standard indicators that are identified in the CSBG annual report in Module 3, that would be useful. And if we could see strategies at the community level and services for individuals and families that are connected to this initiative, that community initiative, there's a typo there, sorry, that are connected to this community initiative, and that it also establishes a profile in the form of the community initiative status form. So if we were in person, I would ask people to take out their documents that for Module 3 to look at, and to think of some indicators that might be there. I'd ask if there's anyone on the line who's done a survey of the standardized indicators, the CNPIs, the Community National Performance Indicators, and has picked one or any that might be useful to talk about or to think about, and that any of the services or strategies, if they've been useful to people. Any thoughts on this? Any comments for the chat?
We don't have any new ones that have come in on this necessarily. We did have one thing, as people might be thinking about this, that we can kind of circle back to.
Okay.
That someone asked whenever we were talking about the theory of aligned contributions, does this model the collective impact approach?
Oh yes. So the aligned contributions is the terminology that's used by the Casey Foundation, and mutually reinforcing activities is the language from the collective impact approach. And you're going to be hearing a lot more about collective impact over the last couple of sessions from the Collective Impact National Forum group. And it's exactly the same. It's talking about how the mutually reinforcing activities are brought together into a standard measurement system that that everyone agrees on. So the group agrees on a common agenda, and then they agree on the strategies that are mutually reinforcing. And it's that big picture thinking. In both cases, both of these are saying, we are not asking you to do something totally different from what you have done. You're an expert in your agency at a certain kind of thing, a certain service. All the members that come together have some expertise. We're saying, how can your expertise be delivered in a way that reinforces the services and the strategies of all the other members of the initiative? How can we align the services and strategies, and how can they reinforce each other in a structured way? So I don't know if that answered the question, but yes, it is exactly. The two concepts are virtually the same, in my opinion. Any thoughts on the community national performance indicators? Too bad we don't have a poll to see how many people have looked at the national performance indicators. That would have been a good poll.
Yeah, I haven't seen anything come through yet.
Okay. This is the one question about the learning community format in this way, where there's so many of you on the line. It's difficult to get the interaction that we would like to have in an in-person format. But the last thing I wanted to just talk about was this whole idea of collecting data and measurement techniques. I think the two pieces that are most important to know about is, what are we going to measure? And that's really defining the indicators. And it's really clearly about saying, here's the need, clearly identified, here's what we think we can change, clearly identified, and then here are some things that we can measure. The indicators really are saying, here are some things that we can measure. And then once you've identified what you're going to measure, the other measurement technique that's important is how you're going to measure it. And so there are a lot of questions that you might want to know. Who has the data, and is it easy to secure, and how often is the data updated? So if it's about high school graduation rates in your school district, in the school district in which your agency operates, or in which your customers live, then the school district would have the data, and it would be updated every year with each new year's graduation class. How easy is the data to secure? That would be different in different communities, and it would have to be part of your negotiations in when you're doing your strategic planning. One of the community level projects that we've talked about before, and we have some information about this also on Moodle and in the community level workshops, was the Greater Lawrence Community Action Agency, who worked on a fire prevention program. And the need was surfaced by just looking at the newspaper and having discussions with other community members who said, and talking to the fire department, who said that the fires were more severe and more damaging, more destructive in the low-income neighborhoods, and they felt that it was because the residents in the low-income neighborhoods didn't understand about proper fire prevention techniques and didn't have smoke detectors and carbon monoxide detectors. And so they formed a coalition to look at different aspects that included training and education, and it included the delivery, the acquisition of, and the distribution of smoke detectors. And the goal was to decrease the severity of fires. So who has the data on that? The fire department would have the data. How often is it updated? Well, it's not updated annually. It's updated. It's not updated every year. So they had to figure out ways to talk to the fire departments to get a sense of the severity of the fires, how they measured them. So there was a process that they're still involved in, to talk about how to secure the data on the number and the frequency and the severity of the actual fires, so that they can show what's been produced. Now, in the meantime, they can talk about how many education programs they've done, how many smoke detectors have been distributed, the percent of households that now have those smoke detectors that didn't before. So they are able to talk about some things along the way, some intermediate benchmarks, but to know about the actual fires, it might take some time to get that data. So you need to understand you may not be able to get data every year to match your program year. So those are things we need to consider as we go into the next piece of figuring out what indicators you're going to measure, who has the data, how easy it is to secure, and how often is your data updated. So will you be able to get data within the next program year or not? I mean, you may have an initiative that you just cannot get the data until well beyond the next program year's reporting period. And what will you do then? What will you report on then? That's the question. So, any other thoughts or questions on that?
I don't think I've seen any come in.
Okay. Well, I'll turn it back over to you.
Okay. And if you all have questions as you're kind of putting your thoughts together over this, please continue to go ahead and just post those in, or you can post those on our Community Action Academy site, and we can start a little discussion online about it. So there's various ways to ask your questions and engage with peers. So what we'll be doing, or Barbara, were you going to say something?
No, sorry.
Oh, okay. So as we move forward with this learning community group, I'll go ahead and pause because we got a question. Let's see.
A brave person who's going to ask a question, yay.
Yeah. So what are some strategies for helping a data-resistant lead agency understand the importance of the data collection process?
Well, it sounds like they need to be part of the data collection and data-centric organization learning community. I think that the whole question of embracing data and understanding data and valuing data is really about organizational culture, and in some cases it's about the community culture, that there needs to be, somebody needs to value the data, and if the lead organization is data resistant, maybe the lead organization is the wrong lead. And that would be one of the things that, if you're going to evaluate the functioning of the partnership or the functioning of the initiative, one of the things is, is there good sharing of data? Is the data that's collected being shared and used? And I think that one of the big barriers to agencies embracing a data-centric approach or a data-centric organizational culture is that they don't see the use or the value of the data that's collected. And if they don't think it's useful, then it's hard for them to follow up on it and to value it. So I would say first to find ways to identify the value of the data, the usefulness of the data in terms of decision making or strategizing or improving things going forward, and then the rest follows. I think the rest follows naturally, but it's that finding the value that I think is the core issue. And maybe other people have other ideas. Yeah,
and we did have another question come in about determining the best measures and how that's always a challenging thing, especially with delivering social services that create outcomes. And someone was wondering if we know of any resources for this, like for the actual verbiage for measures.
Well, and it depends on what the measures are. Some areas, like for example, education and health, have been highly researched, and you can find a lot of language that has to do with that. But I'd say the first place to look is in the indicators in the CSBG annual report. That, you know, if there are indicators that are stated in a way in the annual report that are useful to you, use those. And if you find something that's similar to what you've done, what you've seen in the annual report, but not exactly right, you know, submit a question to NASCASP about that, and they have a team of people thinking about indicators. Because once you define the indicator, then from there is how you figure out what you're going to measure. If I'm going to if my indicator is an increase in grade level achievement in reading, then I'm going to find ways to measure that grade level achievement in reading. If it's about self-esteem or social networks or some other capacities that are more ambiguous, then I would say to further define those things in a way that you're more concrete in your indicator statements, and then your measurement tools can be developed based on that.
Yeah, and she clarified that, yes, finding the ways to measure the outcomes is what she meant. Right.
But you first have to identify the indicator. It's like there's not a quick answer to that question. If you have a series of indicators that you would like to measure, that you would want to discuss, this is appropriate forum to do that. To submit, these are the indicators that I would like to measure, what kind of measurement tools would be appropriate for them. And we could brainstorm those measurement tools for the outcomes related to those indicators. But without identifying what you want to measure, there isn't any way that you're going to be able to come up with measurement tools. It's just too amorphous. You have to know what you think is going to change. And then you can look for it, you can observe it, you can document it, and you can measure it.
Yeah, and I think that would be a great kind of question or thing to pose on Community Action Academy to work through and then even follow up on through our affinity group call in April.
That sounds great. It sounds great. So whoever asked that question, if you have some specific things that you would like help with measuring, but just to say, what can I measure, what tools can I use to measure, is way too open-ended, but let's narrow it down. Let's focus on the indicator, and let's even start with saying what the need was that prompted you to think that this indicator was going to be the right measure. And then we can look at we can discuss and brainstorm some specific kinds of measurement tools.
Yep, so Marlene, if you want to send those to us or just post in Community Action Academy, that would be great. And we'll keep the discussion going on that. All right, well, I'm not seeing any other questions at this time, so I'll go through some of our concluding information. But if you continue to come up with questions, go ahead and type them in, and I'll take one more pause before we end for today's webinar. But I'd like to let you know where to access resources and where to further engage for this learning community. So first of all, we have our learning community blog, which is at lcrcweb.com. You can subscribe to regular updates, so you'll get those through your email. And we have a resource bank on there for all of our learning community resources, as well as blog posts on relevant topics and information about our different learning community groups. We also have our CSBG TNTA Resource Center. So on there, we have hundreds of resources. You can do a keyword search. There's also a consultant bank if you're looking for any sort of consultant, and you can submit TNTA requests, although you can submit those directly to partnership staff as well. And then this is what I talked a little bit about earlier as far as the different ways to engage and learn through this learning community group. So we are an open learning community group, so that means that you can really opt in, but depending on kind of what you're hoping to gain from the participation in this group, then there's kind of 3 different options. You can engage in 1, 2, or 3 of them, depending on your availability and interest. So I won't go through this graphic again, but just a reminder that these are available. But I will talk about our specific opportunities in each area that we have coming up. So we have our webinar Wednesdays, and we also kind of call this our National Webinar Series. It happens every Wednesday at 2 p.m. Eastern Time. And we basically go through our different learning community topics kind of on a rotational basis. So results at the community level will come up every usually 5 or 6 weeks. So we have our full list of all the different learning community group webinars is on our webinars page of our website, which is linked in this slide. It's also under the events tab of the website. But our next kind of upcoming series related to results at the community level for this particular learning community group is going to be focused around collective impact. And we're having FSG, which is the national organization that Barbara mentioned, that leads up the Collective Impact Forum online. They're going to be presenting this series of webinars that you see on your screen. So they'll go May through September and really kind of dive into introductory collective impact, but then looking at the different roles, developing your common agenda, the evaluation of collective impact, and then ending out with looking at community engagement and equity in collective impact work. So we will be posting those registration links very soon online, as well as posting those on Community Action Academy. Community Action Academy is a really good spot to get kind of your regular updates on this learning community group. Then we're also going to be having another affinity group call. We had one last week where we engaged with some of the people that have been joining in these webinars to talk about community level needs. And so as we're bridging on to strategies and measuring community level work, we want to do another affinity group call in a couple weeks on this topic. So what would be great in the meantime is for those of you interested in participating in this, please put it on your calendar, and then please come into our Community Action Academy space, which I've sent the link through the chat for that. If you haven't created an account on Community Action Academy yet, it is free and quick to do so. And there's open enrollment into this course, so it should be after you get registered. It's just a self-enroll quick process you have to do. But once you're in that course and you're planning to attend this affinity group call just to discuss more with peers and engage with Barbara and I, it would be great to pose any questions that you might have or any examples of things you might want to talk about, like the looking at how to measure different outcome indicators and things like that. So I encourage you to put this on your calendar and then think about what you might ask or bring to the call to discuss. This is Community Action Academy that I was talking about, powered by a learning management system called Moodle. And so the main site link here is moodle.communityactionpartnership.com. That's where you'll create an account. Once your account is confirmed, which will come through via email, you can log in, go to the course categories, and under learning communities, you can choose open learning community groups and results at the community level. And this is where we post resources that are relevant to the webinars we do. We post the slides from the webinars as well as the recordings, and then there's discussion forums and other opportunities to engage on there. I did just see a question come in about whether we can invite non-community action partners to view the Collective Impact Series. And yes, our national webinar series on Wednesdays at 2 p.m. Eastern Time is open to our entire network. as well as whoever else happens to stumble upon it on our website. So yes, absolutely. Feel free to invite people that maybe you're working on some community projects with, or you know, you're engaging in those types of discussions, because it would be good for those different community partners and such to be hearing the same information you are. And it might kind of really get those conversations going. So absolutely open, you know, those webinars are open to all. Our Community Action Academy is specifically for Community Action Network members. And so you have to be employed at a community action agency or state association, state CSBG office, or a national partner organization for access to our Community Action Academy. But the webinars are open to all. All right, I think that is all. I don't see any other questions. Contact info is on the screen here for our Learning Community Resource Center team. Barbara's information is also in the Community Action Academy site. And Barbara, did you have anything else?
No, I think that's all. Just looking forward to getting some real interaction happening on the other sites, so that it's not just a one-way information dump for the community learning centers, that we get some questions, like the questions that we were asked today about what kind of measurement tools. That should stimulate some really good discussion, so I'm looking forward to seeing follow-up on that on the site.
Yep, we appreciate it. We like questions and discussion. So, all right. Well, thank you all very much for participating today. We'll have the recording up in the next couple days, hopefully. But go ahead and log on to Community Action Academy for the slides and other resources from today's webinar. Thank you all. Have a great day.